Call to order. Good morning to everyone and welcome to the February 9th meeting. I'm going to pass a bit of information along regarding conduct, how we're going to conduct our meeting today. We ask that all the members please turn on video if you have it. We ask that you mute your line if you're not speaking. Please identify yourself each time you speak. And during the public comment section, if you wish to make a comment, please raise your hand on the Zoom function and we'll call upon you. A recording of this meeting will be available on the CJCC website after each meeting. This morning, we'd like to welcome 3 new members that are joining us for the first time: County Commissioner Shannon Portillo, Chief Court Services Officer Susan Bickelman, and 3rd District appointee Mariel Ferraro. Good morning, everyone. The first order of business, we usually talk about minutes. Those are available on the CJCC website, the hub, if you're interested in seeing the past meeting. The first item today is the mobile response update from Stacy Cooper of Heartland Radec.
Hey, Pam, I'm just going to tee this up a little bit real quickly. So just to bring everybody on the council up to date, as everyone knows, in 2018, November of 2018, Douglas County voters passed a sales tax that was dedicated to improve services, treatment, and facilities in our behavioral health system. And for the last year and a half, 2 years, we have been on a march to implement, something that is to bring a crisis campus online. But part of that initiative was to look at the system more comprehensively, and in addition to building a crisis center, to look at designing a continuum of crisis services that would prevent people from escalating to the point where they would need a crisis facility. So in communities around the country, a sort of crisis continuum that involves a 24/7 integrated crisis line, mobile response teams, and a crisis facility. That's the continuum of services that is really effective in diverting people away from jails, from unnecessary EMS runs, and from unnecessary visits to the emergency department. Beginning in March of last year, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council created a mobile response work group to look at how we could expand mobile response in Douglas County as part of what we're doing with this overall initiative. At our last meeting, we shared a video that kind of gave you kind of an overview on some of the philosophy behind mobile response. I wanted to share before we turn this over to Stacy and Monica, kind of one more overview of the 3 key components to a crisis response system. This comes from an organization called Crisis Now. And so can everybody see that? Okay. And let me just double check. I want to make sure I checked the right buttons, which I did not do.
It's been a bad day. You've been in a bad car accident or experiencing chest pain. Fortunately, there is an emergency medical system built to respond immediately to your crisis. Now rewind. It's been a bad day. But this time it's due to a mental health crisis, like thoughts of suicide. The same emergency medical system that responds to chest pain also responds to this type of crisis and is less than ideal to handle it. Yet it is this system that responds to thousands of people in a mental health crisis every day. In general, everyone in a mental health crisis gets routed through an emergency department. There, a person in crisis often waits between 18 hours and 3 days for connection to mental health care. This approach is difficult for patients and wastes a lot of resources. But the Crisis Now model outlines a tested and proven alternative, a way to improve crisis systems across the country by expanding the options for those of us in a crisis, while reducing overall healthcare costs by creating a true emergency crisis service. And there are big savings in the justice system too, while dramatically improving the experience of the person and their family members. Drawn from current national best practices in crisis response, Crisis Now focuses on 3 components that help ensure an appropriate level of care to anyone in crisis. Component 1, a crisis call center staffed by specialists that coordinate all levels of crisis care. They evaluate the current crisis and can support and stabilize up to 90% of the cases they get. Those that need more, get more, with these hubs dispatching appropriate resources and then supporting those resources and finding the best solutions. Component 2, 24/7 mobile crisis teams that work in the streets, meeting people where they are, and for the majority, resolving their crisis right then. Dispatched by the call center hub, they lessen the burden on local police and reduce the stigma that some feel when a uniformed officer knocks on their door. Component 3. Crisis stabilization locations, which constitute the retreat model, can offer short-term care for people who need support and observation, regardless of their level of crisis. These programs operate 24/7 and are the right door to everyone in a mental health crisis, including those that may require involuntary treatment. These high-tech, high-touch facilities divert away from the emergency departments and jails while providing immediate specialized treatment. Police no longer need to decide between EDs or jail. The no wrong door approach reduces the time needed to handle these cases from hours to minutes and allows police to go back to supporting public safety, a role they're uniquely trained to do. Let's review the impact of the Crisis Now model in Maricopa County, Arizona, fourth most populous county in the U.S. In 2017, Maricopa County Police connected more than 23,000 people in a behavioral health crisis directly to crisis care, and those people were accepted 100% of the time. The Crisis Now initiatives saved the time equivalent of 37 full-time officers, reducing wait times in emergency departments for behavioral health patients by a total of 45 years, saving local hospitals and emergency departments a total of $37 million in avoided costs and losses, freeing them up to help the patients they're designed to treat, while routing behavioral health patients to a course of care that's best suited to their needs, and reducing Maricopa County's overall healthcare costs by an estimated $260 million, more than twice the cost of Crisis Now services. To learn more about how Crisis Now can make a difference in your community, go to crisisnow.com and download our white paper.
So this work group has been meeting since March. It took a while to get the right configuration of folks together and to get in a regular meeting schedule, but we've been making really good progress. And what we'd like to share is have an opportunity for you to meet Stacy Cooper and Monica Kurtz, Stacy from Heartland RADAC and Monica Kurtz from Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters. In addition, Bert Nash, DECA, all of our behavioral health partners have been participating in this process. But what we wanted to focus on today in a short period of time was some thinking about providing an overview of what the work group is up to, and then what a 988 integrated crisis call center would look like in Douglas County. So Stacy?
Yeah, thanks all for the opportunity. Like Bob mentioned, I'm co-chair of this group. I'm basically facilitating the opportunity for all of us to have conversations around this. We've done a lot of work in this group to really solidify the role that we're trying to play and to get from the ground up some plans in which we want to deploy in regards to mobile response. So to kind of get us started, one of the things that I'm going to make sure everybody can see this. Like Bob outlined, we started meeting in March, but we really kind of had a reboot this past fall to really solidify for this group, what are we trying to achieve? And so through the support of Dr. Balfour, who is one of the CXNS consultants that the county has hired to support the work with the Crisis Center and some of the initiatives that are being supported simultaneously, she has really given us some feedback as to what this could look like. And so what we did in one of these first meetings this past fall was really identify what is this work group focused on so we can kind of stay narrow it on that goal. And our focus is to just create some level of proposal and some foundational information that identifies how we want to deploy mobile response and our mobile response team itself that responds to community members experiencing a behavioral health crisis. And we have defined that as something that is related to mental illness and substance use disorders, with the shared goal of preventing avoidable jail, emergency department, hospital use by providing the least restrictive setting that can safely meet the needs of people experiencing this crisis. Some of this language was taken out of the work that Dr. Balfour has done and some evidence-based documents that she's produced, but we were able to come together as a work group to really identify that this is our shared goal, and it really outlines what we're trying to focus on, which is the behavioral health population that, to the extent of substance use and mental illness that is experiencing that in this community. So one of the things as far as definitions was really important that we had some of the same definitions across the spectrum, because there's lots of different people in this work group, everyone from law enforcement to chief of police to Douglas County folks to different individuals within the integrated crisis team. So we're really focused on the mental illness, we're really focused on substance use disorders, and we're defining crisis as defined by the person that's experiencing it. So there's a spectrum to what crisis can be, and we're really thoughtful around it's really individualized, and it's based on what's going on with that individual at any given time. The other key component to this work group and the focus is really the ability to divert from law enforcement at all. We want to ensure that we have the mechanisms in the team in place that we don't have to access law enforcement unless there's a safety concern. And so we want to divert from law enforcement involvement, jails, and obviously that emergency department component. So that's really what we were able to hash out. The biggest thing that we're continuing to talk about is the functionality. You know, one of the things that we've started to line item out is the different components of functions, all the different things we want this crisis team to do. But the primary focus really is to provide triage assessment intervention at the point of behavioral health crisis in the community, with the goal of referring community members to the appropriate level of care. So we know that crisis center is going to come online at one point. We have other resources in this community that would be appropriate for supporting those individuals that are in crisis at the time they're in crisis. And shared to the next step would be, diverting from emergency departments and jails and the psychiatric hospitalizations for these folks. So we want to take care of their needs in the community while they're in the community and keep them in the community as often as we can. And when we can't, we want to utilize the crisis center and the different resources there. We're going to be able to answer some questions, but the next step really is something that Monica is going to be able to cover. So I'm going to volley that over to Monica.
Thanks, Stacy. As has been said, my name is Monica Kurz, and I'm the Vice President for External Programming with Kansas Suicide Prevention Headquarters, formerly Headquarters, Inc. Some folks may know us that way in the community. And I am really excited to be sharing this idea of a crisis call center acting as an air traffic control with the group today. So in one of the pieces of work that I do for our organization, I spent a lot of 2019 meeting with people kind of across the state as we helped the state to develop their state suicide prevention plan. And something that I heard from consumers of mental health services, in particular parents and family members, over and over again was, my family member is in crisis, I don't know how to get them help. Like this is a universal experience, right? People say to me that help is available and I don't know how to get there. And so what that very clearly indicates to me is that we need a couple of different things. We need a bright red, shiny front door that everyone can identify to get into crisis services. You know, this community has really come together to figure out how to create a comprehensive crisis continuum. We're standing up crisis housing, we are standing up a crisis center, but we need to make sure that it is accessible to everyone and everyone knows how to get there. Well, a really straightforward way to do that, what national best practice is telling us, is that one way to do that is by building a comprehensive crisis call center, a hub that can act as an air traffic control, where our people in crisis are our airplanes, and we know where they are in the system and who we're passing them off to next, just like an air traffic controller would. And so that is what we have set out to build, based on the existing resources that we have at our agency. At this point, we are kind of the only shop in town that is nationally accredited to provide crisis line services. And we want to take what we do really well, which is help folks who call in find solutions in their natural environment to come down out of crisis, and add to that some really robust communication and systems where we can refer to our important behavioral health partners in the community, help folks get scheduled, take out some of the guesswork about how to get to the next steps in treatment. And also, as the mobile crisis response team is built, to be the mechanism for those teams to get sent out, so that if we're not able to help someone's safety plan on the phone, which we think we're going to be able to do the majority of the time, right? Between 80 and 90% of the time, we think we're going to be able to stabilize them just through phone contact. But when we can't, we have an option to send out a mental health professional, a behavioral health professional, to really engage with that person and help them resolve their crisis right there in the community. And then if they can't, then we can access the crisis center. but essentially giving folks an additional option and a really clear way to access services. And you'll see on the slide, we have some work to do, right? We are working on bringing together the partners that we need to line out some decision trees. How do we know, when we can work together with 911 dispatch to pass things over to them, or are there things that we can take off of their hands? We need to hear from our law enforcement partners about the kinds of calls and the tools that we can use to determine when a suicide crisis meets a safety concern that requires a law enforcement response or doesn't, right? And so we, I think, are working out those pieces as a work group with our partners like Bert Nash, like with RADAC, and Tony Foster at the 911 Dispatch Center has also been very helpful in helping us to think through some of those things. So we're definitely in process, but I think feeling really excited and confident about what we're going to be able to pull together for this community through the work of the work group.
Yeah, I definitely think that we're making a lot of progress and we have some things we still have to address. One of the biggest components of this conversation is the when. When should this mobile crisis team be accessible? When should they be deployed? And that conversation is upcoming later this month. I think that the intent behind today's conversation is really to just start the conversation about mobile response, make sure everybody's aware that this is happening. We have some initiatives and some pushing towards the end goal of being able to talk to the commission about really what our plans are and have all the partners in place and some strategy around how and when and what is going to be deployed. So these conversations are taking place right now. And we have these key conversations about the various roles. And I think the when that need to be occurring this month, I think the next time we come back to you guys, we're going to have those answers and we'll be able to have some more solidified, basically work group recommendations to be able to share with you and to make sure we get everybody's kind of feedback and, as we navigate these conversations so we can kind of take in where this plays into the criminal justice side, but also the lean in towards the behavioral health side and the integrated crisis team, because it really does take a village to support these individuals that are experiencing crisis at the time they're experiencing it. And I think the other intent to this is to say that this work group is going to come up with some strategies, but the timeline in which we're going to be able to deploy this work, and actually see it manifest in the community, we're also hoping to kind of get an idea about that as well. So not only, we can't necessarily initially maybe prop up a 24/7 hour service. However, we're going to be able to utilize the different components in the system of care to fill in the gaps. And if we can start with the gaps first and then kind of move on from there, I think we're going to get an idea about what is going to work and how this mobile team can be, utilized in the entire system of care. Everything from how this mobile team exists to the access center, to the crisis center, to how DECA is utilizing detox facilitations to, we have the care coordination element for Heartland RADAC, and we have all these different components and different players. So we really are trying to ensure that we are meeting the needs, we are filling the gaps, and we are utilizing the entire integration in the system of care to be able to, get this off the ground. I wonder if there's Monica or Bob or Mike, is there anything that we might need to kind of walk through or share?
No, Stacey, I think you did a great job. I think the primary need that we're trying to address is when are people in our community most vulnerable to finding themselves in a situation where their only option is going to an emergency room, right, or connecting with law enforcement or continuing to decline in the community. The great thing about the work we are doing as a community is that we're taking a community that is really open for crisis at the moment, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and figuring out how we expand so that we have true 24/7 behavioral health crisis response that does not tax law enforcement, EMS, and our correctional facilities. So there's tremendous opportunity with this group through the leadership of the CJCC and the support of the Behavioral Health Leadership Coalition to come together with a plan and a proposal that says, here's how we think we move from where we are to where we want to be.
Yeah, great job, Monica and Stacy. I just want to highlight that all of our law enforcement agencies have staff represented on this work group, including Lawrence Douglas County Police and Fire, and of course, Burt Nash, DECA, LMH, RADAC, and headquarters. So we really have everyone at the table working towards a common goal here. And I appreciate the work that Stacy and Monica have done to get us all on the same page. So thank you.
Welcome. Anyone have any questions or anything we can answer?
Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Okay, yeah, I see that there are a bunch of hands, so I didn't know if there was an order. Hi, y'all. Darren Kennedy. I'm a community member of the CJCC. One, I just think that I'm just always excited to hear the work of this particular group. And every time I hear something else, I'm like, yes, oh my gosh, this is so overdue. So just plaudits on that, obviously. I'm just wondering, and maybe this is maybe less for you and Stacy, Monica, maybe it's more possibly the law enforcement folks, but thinking about the charge of the CJCC, I'm just wondering I was really interested in the phrase divert from law enforcement. And I'm wondering how many folks are we actually thinking at this point, if the program goes through, we're actually talking about being able to do, how many calls, et cetera, folks are actually are we thinking this will actually divert from having to go into the criminal justice system? Does that question sort of make sense?
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I was scrolling over to see if Matt was still here, because one of the things that we have done in the work group is to take a look at the data that we have from our law enforcement partners and from other folks to think about kind of the volume of people that we may be able to serve with a crisis line and with a mobile crisis response. I will let Matt interrupt me and talk about what we do and do not know from that data.
I don't think we know the exact answer, unfortunately, Darren, but we are getting there. We have data from LMH on behavioral health visits to the EED, to the emergency department. We have the headquarters data on their crisis calls and Burt Nash data on their crisis calls, but we're still trying to get a sense of if we did have a mobile crisis response team up and running, how many people would that serve instead of the current facilities and current services? So we're still working on that.
Yeah, okay. I love that. If I could toss that in a request for the next time we see you, I would love to know that.
One thing that I will mention, Darren, is Vibrant Emotional Health is the organization that administers the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So we work very closely with them at our organization because we're a National Suicide Prevention Lifeline provider. And so one of the things that's happening nationally is that we're going to be transitioning from an 800 number over to a 3-digit crisis line, this 988 that folks may have heard about. So as they're doing projections and thinking about what kind of call volume we're going to see based on the 988 transition, one kind of estimate that they have given us is that we should probably assume that about 8% of calls that come into 911 are mental health or behavioral health related. Now, that's not like a one-to-one comparison, right? Not all of those 8% of people are going to call 988 instead. There's going to be some kind of different kinds of adoption. Not everyone who calls us is not going to need help, right, from a law enforcement agency. So there's some variability there, but that's at least one metric to kind of think about.
Got it. Thank you. That helps a lot.
Darren, and the big number, I think, on that in terms of emergency room data is 4,000 people a year go into LMH's emergency room in the midst of a behavioral health crisis. 1,100 of those people are presenting with suicidal ideation or a suicide attempt. So in terms of just some simple raw numbers, I think that is where the majority of our crisis folks, our folks in crisis arrive. And then in addition, the law enforcement calls, I think, supplement that as well. So, but I think we do know that big number. It's 4,000 people a year in the emergency department. 1,100 of them are experiencing suicide risk. So those are just simple big numbers to get your head around to start.
Great. Shannon, do you want to go next?
I think Marielle actually got her hand up first.
Okay.
So
Good,
I'll
tell
defer to her and go right after.
This is Marielle Ferredo, community representative. My question is, what has been the response, or has there been any outreach to the community about what types of services, what interest there is, how often folks feel like they're under pressure for this? Because speaking from a community standpoint, we wouldn't call 911 in the first place, so there would have to be some sort of really in-depth communication and conversation around what the service provides, and that barrier around, are you going to immediately contact the police, or what that's going to look like. So I was interested to see, do you have community members in this work group? Do you have especially affected folks that, you know, have gone through the either hospital or the, you know, the police with these types of issues, who are giving input to this? Because while there's a lot of great centers here, I'm not really hearing the people's response on this. So just a question, and I could be missing it too. Thank you.
I'll take this one because I think the answer is no. You raise a good question, and I think it's something that we need to work on. And so we'll get to work on adding a couple more voices to the table in that perspective.
You know, Marielle, I think that your point is well taken about there being concern with regards to, like, if I do reach out, what is going to happen if I call a crisis line. And so while Bob is correct that we don't have a community member on the council, I will tell you that from the work that we do every day at the crisis line, those are concerns that we hear, right? And so that conversation around having to talk with folks about, we are a safe place for you to tell us about your thoughts, even if those are suicide, or if they are about violence to somebody else. And we want to gather that information in a really compassionate way so that we can do, you know, kind of a person-centered approach. And, you know, if we need to call in extra help, we absolutely will. We do that. But so I think that those are conversations that we are very used to having at like an individual level. And it does bear some thought to think about how we have those at a community level as well. Because we get it a lot. Are you going to call the police, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
And I would echo that for our team as well. Our team gets that same kind of concern regularly when they call Bert Nash. So,
yeah.
But I like the idea of bringing on some people onto this group for that purpose.
Yeah, I would strongly suggest at least a representative from that at least an affected community member. Yeah, I mean, though you do work with them, I just see a lot of folks who won't even approach the services. So just something to think about.
Thank you for the presentations. I am really excited for the mobile response and for 988. I do keep hearing a lot of, as Marielle pointed out, a lot of different organizations. And as we think about kind of what all these organizations represent, we kind of have a smaller focus on individual cities, some focus on the county, and some focus more broadly across the state with the rollout of 988 and a number of different funding mechanisms. So Bob mentioned the sales tax, but we also know that we have funding coming for 988 through a variety of sources. What kind of coordination or what kind of discussions are we having as far as the sustainability and kind of long-term funding of these different initiatives?
Commissioner Portillo, I don't think we're there yet. I mean, in terms of what this work group is doing, I think what our hope is that we would, in March or April, have a sense of what it might cost to start to bring something on this like this online. And then based on our estimate of what the costs are, then we can start to look at how we leverage funding sources. That's not a good answer, and it's an example of the work that the work group has to do. But I think we need to understand what the model would cost to deploy in Douglas County. What it would cost to deploy over the weekend, what it would cost to deploy 5 days, what it would cost to deploy 7 days, so that we have a scope of what this potentially could cost, and then we could start to look at how we partner and leverage the right funding sources to make sure this is sustainable.
Just to add one other component, this is Steve DeVore. I'm with Kansas Suicide Prevention HQ. So 988, when it was passed at a federal level as an unfunded mandate. So I just to be able to make some correction there. So as of right now, there is absolutely no funding that is associated with 988. So we are actively trying to work at a local, county, state level to secure funding. But as of right now, there is $0 that are coming into our organization to be able to manage and then to deploy 988. They're talking about, as Monica shared, there's some data out there about how often or how great of an increase that's going to create for our office. And it's anywhere from, it could double to go all the way up to 6 times what we're currently answering. So just so it's kind of, I just want to make that known that you mentioned that there was multiple funding levels for 988. I really wish there were, and I think there will be in the future. I think right now the challenge is just trying to be able to secure that as we move forward.
Well, and what Steve is not saying directly is that we have been working with the Kansas State legislator to try to get a bill introduced and then passed that will create a fund for suicide prevention and intervention services that could fund the 988 statewide. So that's something that I'm hoping to get a text message soon that says that it has been introduced by the Health and Human Services Committee. So everybody cross your fingers for me that happens today. Thank you, Darren.
And I will add that in terms of some potential support for mobile crisis, the mobile crisis team, there is federal legislation around CCBHC, which is the Certified Community Behavioral Health Care. And part of that does require a mobile response, the ability to respond in the community to crisis. A bill was introduced this last week or 2 weeks ago in the Kansas legislature to have them consider the Kansas becoming a CCBHC state. Now that could be a couple of years down the road, but there is a potential for some funding down the road to help support a portion of this. So, but it will be like a lot of our things, we're patching together a number of different funding sources to make things successful.
Thank you all.
That's great. Sheriff, you had a question?
Yes, thank you. I've got a couple. And unfortunately, I took a phone call right in the middle of that, and I may have missed a few things, so I apologize if you've answered this. Monica, I think you talked about it being a air traffic control, and I think that's a great example. My question is, who runs air traffic control? Who is this entity that will be taking on this momentous task? And then that kind of bleeds into what community members or people will be in charge of it. What's the governing board? What's the governing group of this co-responder program? What umbrella does it fall under? I'll start with two to start with, and then I've got a couple more.
So I'll take the air traffic control, and then Bob, maybe I'll toss it to you for the second question. Does that seem fair? So thank you, Sheriff Armbruster. At this point, the work group has kind of come to a consensus that it makes sense for Steve and I's organization the Kansas Suicide Prevention HQ to take responsibility for the crisis call hub that would act as the air traffic control. So like we said during the presentation that looks like a few different things. It looks like providing crisis counseling on the phone to de-escalate folks when possible, including, a collaborative safety plan. It looks like referrals and warm handoffs to mental health providers and substance use providers and other folks in our community, like perhaps the care center or the Willow or kind of the resource that makes the most sense. And then it will also look like dispatching or sending out those mobile crisis response teams or team. I guess I shouldn't say teams, it's not plural, there's one, when they're available. So that I think hopefully answers the first question. Then, like I said, I'm going to throw it to Bob.
Well, and I just want to keep emphasizing that we're very early in this process, right? And so I think the questions that are being raised here are excellent, and the opportunities to add the right voices to the table are significant, and we should capitalize on those. I'm also going to turn to Sarah a little bit for, just to provide a little bit of context in terms of process, because there are some decisions that need to be made in terms of where a call center would live and where a mobile team would live, and how those two elements would, integrate well together. And there's, I think, some significant conversations that need to go on both within our criminal justice partners and with our behavioral health partners about what is the best structure for that. And we don't have that to put before you for, feedback at this point. Sarah, do you want to?
I think Bob highlighted the issue pretty clearly. Yeah, we're very early on in this process. So I don't think we really have that governance worked out yet, Sheriff, and then how each of these pieces will happen. So I just stay tuned.
The fortunate thing that I think we need to keep reminding ourselves of is that we do have these community stakeholders who are very invested in meeting the needs of the people in our community who are vulnerable and who need help. And so there's tremendous will here to figure out how to assemble a system that we don't have and we very much need. We need to be smart and strategic about how we build that model. And so, I would offer to this group, if there's anyone on this group who would like to be more involved in the conversations that are going on, Mike, I think, reaching out to Mike to get involved on the work group or to schedule some additional conversations or focus groups as we move through this process is probably some good next steps to take.
Agreed.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say there were some questions in the chat, Pam, before we move on that we probably should, because just for the Open Records and Open Meetings Act, not everyone can see the chat. So I think it's probably best that we raise those questions verbally. So I don't know, Mike or Pam, if you want to read them or if somebody wants to just chime in with their questions.
Do you want to do those first?
Sorry, I offered information. Wasn't really a question, just to let the group know, but certainly everybody should know. I looked up 2019 and 2020 care and treatment cases. Those are cases involving people who are a danger to themselves or others. It's a civil commitment. It usually doesn't involve criminal charges. In 2019, we had 146 of those cases. In 2020, we had 125. So more than a couple a week, which I know represents only a modest percentage of the people who are actually sort of entering the front end of the system that we're talking about. And I just have to believe that this could have a tremendous impact in a lot of ways. I know that the hospital has communicated that they deal with this a lot more than we do. And I just think it's a great discussion. I appreciate it. I would ask, is Judge Simpson on the work group? Bob, do you know?
Judge Simpson has not been a part of this work group, Judge McCabria, but there is another group that is specifically looking at issues related to the care and treatment. And Judge Simpson actually is leading that work.
Okay.
And there's a lot of overlap between, the Burton Ash and DECA and Heartland Raid Act team members are on that. So those two conversations are happening in separate spheres, but they're very much linked and integrated. It's just sort of like making sure that we can focus enough attention in both of those realms, because to your point, we're serving the same group of people. I mean, there's about 150 people in our community who really make demands on our system of care in terms of how and where they cycle. And at the health department, we're trying to get a firmer grasp on, is that 150, is that really our high utilizer population? How do we quantify that? How do we qualify that? How do we figure out how to wrap around those folks? But it's about 125 people in care and treatment. It's about 130 people a year that we send to Osawatomie. So that's another important number. About 150 is where there's tremendous opportunity to make a difference.
Of the ones that we've identified.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Great, thanks.
And we did upgrade. I say just this week we updated the all the work group rosters on the website. So those are listed there. And there was a question in the chat box about opportunities to provide advocacy at the state level for funding for 988. And that is one of the topics that we asked Little Government Relations to keep an eye on. And so as there's opportunities to provide testimony, whether by letter or by physical presentation, we'll certainly keep you up to date on that. But that is an area of priority for utilizing Little Government Relations.
Well, and Mike,
go ahead,
I just wanted to jump in about the work group updates, and I can probably look on the website and find this, but I'm going to be rude and ask anyway. Do we have a listing of whether organizations are nonprofits, part of the city, part of the county, separate standalone agencies? Because when we're thinking about these questions of governance and kind of sustainability and funding, it may be helpful to kind of list that out, because I know a lot of folks may have heard a name, but they don't actually know what type of organization it is. And these are going to be some of our big long-term questions when we think about working together in collaboration. So could we list that along with the work group?
Yeah, Commissioner, that's a good suggestion. You're going to take it off of one page. I've been trying to stay on one page. But no, that makes a lot of sense to add that. And frankly, we have so much participation in the work groups that I really can't shrink it any smaller and fit on one page anyway. So time to grow. And that's something we can certainly add.
Thank you.
If I could just
add. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure that the DA's office is represented in these work groups. That may be the case. There's just a lot coming at me in the last month or so, but we really want to collaborate with the community, have been doing so, and other aspects of what we're trying to do here in terms of reform. So glad to be represented and to help in any way that we can to come up with some solutions. Certainly, we have the behavioral court and we do have the care and treatment proceedings, as Judge McCabe indicated, of which I've been doing a lot of work on myself just to get a sense of what we're dealing with, and having this particular approach that's being proposed is really something that I find exciting. And so however we can be helpful and represent the office, just let me know.
Absolutely. Great idea.
I think the remainder of my questions, like one of them is very simple. Is this is going to, I assume this is going to be countywide. These services will be available to our rural community members, Baldwin, Eudora, Lecompton, as well as not just the city of Lawrence. Is that correct?
Correct.
I see a lot of nods. I'm going to take that as a
yeah. That is correct.
Right.
We have representatives from all of those.
Okay, I know it's strange to ask a yes or no question and get an answer, so that's perfect. So then and then I want to throw this out as that I am super on board with getting something of this going. So the reason I ask this is not to undo or look back at the work that's already being done, but is to simply ask the question is, during my research, I kept coming up with the CAHOOTS model. And so my question to you all is, was that vetted out? Was this Crisis Now model picked for a reason specifically for our community? Or And I go back to the air traffic controller, whereas the Cahoots model sends everything through our dispatch center as it is, which is already operating 24/7, already have people that are trained in that kind of stuff, except for they don't have the specific training that a counselor would need, but they do have the ability to redirect those planes in the air to the right places. And so while I see both sides of it, my question is was this model looked at and was decided for some reason that it wasn't going to work here?
Sheriff, I think it's we did not select the Crisis Now model. I showed you the Crisis Now video because it made it easier to sort of have the overview of this. So a model has not been selected. Cahoots is very much a model that we've discussed and been looking at. We've looked at a lot of things, and we've been following the guidance of the Connections AZ consultants from Arizona that have been helping us with the Crisis Center. So it's all in play. And it's, again, I just want to reemphasize, this is early, and this is a good opportunity for us to identify what focused conversations we need to have so that as the decision tree moves forward on how we're going to move this forward, we make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row and we've really done due diligence in exploring a best range of options that's appropriate for a county of our size.
Right. That's fantastic. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I kind of, if I'm listening from the outside, I'm hearing myself volunteer for this committee. I really do feel I've already bitten off way more than I can chew, but I've found that I like to keep biting. So if there's anything I can do, I've already reached out to some communities who, one, Eugene, that founded the White Feather and their Cahoots program, to go up and take a tour and look at it. But I'm also reaching out to other agencies. I just read an article where Denver has implemented that program and is doing very well. So I want to go out and try to see, learn from other people's mistakes. So that's all I'll say. And I look forward to hearing more about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great discussion. I showed the next item is the 988 crisis call line. Is that a separate presentation, Monica?
It can be a separate presentation, Pam.
Well, I wasn't sure if it was part of the same thing we just did.
Yeah, it was the same. It was the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably mislabeled that on the agenda, Pam. And we can move on to Sam.
Yeah.
I guess just kind of put out there, if folks have lingering questions about 988, either at the guidance that we're getting from the national level or what's happening here at the state level, I can put my email in the chat. I'm very happy to connect with anybody and provide more information on 988, though caution, it is also early days for the state and how they're considering doing all of that. But if there are lingering questions, happy to help with that.
Great, thank you so much. Our next person presenting is Sam Natalia. And Mike and Shannon and I had the opportunity to visit with him about a week ago and thought it would be important for him to present to the committee, to the council. So Sam, why don't you take it away and talk about the Bronx Defender project?
Wonderful, thanks so much, Pam. I'm gonna try and share my screen and see if this works. All right. Okay, is this coming through?
Mm-hmm.
Great. So yeah, thank you so much, Pam. I'm really grateful to Mike for connecting me to so many stakeholders and service providers in preparing for this presentation. I wanted to thank Judge McCabria for meeting and for Matt Cravens for providing some data around the state of misdemeanors in Douglas County, to Heather Cessna, she's not here, but from the Board of Indigent Defense Services has been a tremendous resource, as well as with Stacy Cooper from RADAC, who also met, which I think is an important part of the puzzle that I'm really excited to be hopefully working with. So my goal is to share with you the benefits of this model of public defense. And I'm gonna go one step at a time. What does holistic defense mean? What are the benefits of an institutional public defender as an addition to the panel appointment system that we currently have? and how this might work in the context of Douglas County. And I'm going to leave some questions at 2 points in the presentation, at the middle and at the end, to answer whatever you have to the best of my ability. But first, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Sam Allison Natale. I'm a criminal defense attorney living in Lawrence. I formerly worked for the Bronx Defenders, which is, I think, why we got put on the agenda the way that we did. But I've been working since 2018 at the law firm of Bath and Edmonds. And I'm speaking on behalf of Kansas Holistic Defenders. We're a nonprofit organization. I'm the chair of our board, and our board is comprised of Douglas County attorneys, social workers, and community leaders who are working for a better justice system. And we organized around a simple mission. Our mission is to defend Kansans effectively, zealously, and respectfully. And the way that we want to do this is through an interdisciplinary, holistic approach to champion our clients' individual goals and address the root causes of involvement in the legal system. And that's the piece that I really want to hammer home, is that holistic defense is about addressing the root causes of involvement in the legal system and helping people navigate those. And for this reason, effective and holistic criminal defense is going to benefit everyone in our community. And it's going to be something that I hope that our community can be proud of. So the focus of this presentation is this: how do we provide consistent, high quality defense for working class people accused of crimes in Douglas County? And when I was preparing for this presentation, I was asked a fascinating question, which is, why Douglas County? After all, I mean, there's certainly other counties in Kansas that are far behind where we are in terms of justice outcomes. And I thought it was an interesting question, and it's got two major answers. The first one is a boring one, which is simply that we're growing. We're the second largest county in Kansas that doesn't have a public defender of any kind. And we have been essentially providing the same method of indigent defense since we were a much smaller county. But secondly, and more importantly, Douglas County needs this because Douglas County is ready for it. So much has been done by the people on this call and in the community to improve our system. So much has been done to develop really high quality services, and we need to make sure we get the best outcomes out of those services. And a part of doing that is going to be having an institutional defender. The bottom line here, and I'll cut to the chase, is that another major part of this is that this is another tool in our tool chest for reducing the jail population. A holistic public defender's office if we can put this in place for misdemeanors and meet clients before their first appearances and work with existing service providers to connect them to those services in an institutional and holistic way, we're going to be able to resolve those cases faster and with better outcomes for the accused without posing a risk to public safety, and that's going to help reduce the jail population. I'll show you some of the data that supports that these are the outcomes that we can expect to see. So what do we have right now? What we have now is a system of appointed counsel only, right? In which, and the people on this call know how this works, private attorneys work as private contractors, taking on appointed cases at an hourly rate of compensation. This is a system that works at a certain scale, but that is certainly, we're going to argue, is significantly improved when you also have an institutional defender taking cases. And so what are we proposing to add? Holistic institutional public defense. And holistic defense, again, addresses not only the criminal case and the four corners of that courtroom, but also the collateral consequences and the underlying circumstances that contribute to a client's involvement in the justice system. And so what does this look like in practice? Well, in a traditional defense model, you have one attorney representing one client, and occasionally that attorney might work with others like an investigator or like a social worker. But generally in the traditional model of defense, the level of representation is limited to that one case or however many cases that client, that defender has with that person. And what holistic defense does instead is a team-based defense. So we have not just attorneys, but other staff who work with defense attorneys and with clients on the cases. And these are resources that traditional defense offices might not usually have in-house. So these are things like a social worker that will help clients access and maintain enrollment in mental health, drug treatment, or other crisis management services. I mean, as an attorney, I can say we don't know everything. We are not the experts on mental health and on addiction, but we're frequently asked to deal with people whose problems stem from these problems. So we should bring in and work with in-house, in office, the experts in these things. Social workers are also tremendous for not only helping clients in acute crisis, but also to provide effective sentencing advocacy when we go to the court to present them with all the information. We have investigators and these people who interview witnesses, locate and preserve evidence, people who are key to getting a good outcome for a case. Now, this is something that many traditional defenders will have or will contract with for a particular case or in a particular circumstances. But in a holistic office, these people are on the team, they're full-time employees, and they're people that we can call really early in the process of the case to get that evidence sooner, which can totally change the outcome of a case for a client. A holistic defender's office might have specialist attorneys that are in-house that provide consultation or representation to address the collateral consequences of involvement in a criminal investigation. So you might have somebody who is facing eviction as a result of an arrest. You might have somebody who is facing immigration consequences or who has a family court case that is intertwined with their criminal defense case. Now, oftentimes, there are delays that result from having to locate these specialists to advise our clients of collateral consequences before we can move forward with the plea. Having them in-house makes a huge difference. Or rather than having our clients represented essentially by two totally different attorneys who may or may not communicate with each other, we have these attorneys in-house that can advise each other and cooperate with each other. And last but not least, we have client advocates. And I want to go in a little deep on what these people do because I think they're really key to the model. So the best definition of what a good client advocate does comes from Partners for Justice. This is an organization that provides training and support for client advocates at no cost to the counties, so long as the county is funding that advocate's salary. And advocates work one-on-one with clients in addition to the lawyers to solve problems outside of the legal system and to reach out to the broader network of services to find solutions. So this can be a huge variety of things, but a good client advocate can work with someone's landlord to keep them housed if they are looking at some sort of problem as a result of their arrest. They can work with employers to explain the circumstances of somebody's arrest to a client, keep them in that job or help them find a new job. They help recover property. These are the people who know all of the services and benefits that are available within Douglas County, and we have a lot of them, and help clients get access to them. And this is key. I mean, I'm sure that people on this call can think of services or programs that exist that we could, have attorneys and client advocates working with to get better outcomes. I talked to Stacy Cooper from RADAC, and in preparation for this, and RADAC, does care coordination. And I said, okay, well, this is great. I'm very excited about the possibilities of how we can interact. What does it look like right now when attorneys refer to you and try and get their clients involved in this care coordination? And Stacy told me that they have never gotten a referral for those services. So we're leaving good outcomes on the table by not having an office that is prepared to routinely make the best use of these services that exist. We can also think of how holistic defense can change first appearances. So currently, most defendants do not have representation at first appearances. This is a crucial part of the case. It's a crucial thing that an attorney be able to provide advocacy when a bail decision or bond decision is being made. And there's a tremendous amount of things that happen within the system that are really good ahead of that first appearance, right? There's an assessment process through the AID program. There's pretrial assessment information that goes to the court, but attorneys right now are not usually working with these programs before going before a judge to decide bond. And we can imagine an attorney institutional defender's office meeting with clients ahead of their first appearances, working with these care providers and creating a release plan to make it so that bond isn't necessary. And also they're going to have the resources to help that release plan be successful, to get the person the treatment or the services they might need to make sure that they return to court. And we are fortunate enough to have a lot of examples of where this model works really well. I've just got 3 here. Bronx Defenders, which is the office that I come from, but also Still She Rises in Tulsa, which provides holistic services specifically to women who are involved in the criminal justice system. Restoring Justice in Houston is another nonprofit that provides these services. All of these people are extremely excited to share with other offices their best practices and how they get these. But it's also worth mentioning that to a greater or lesser degree, holistic models of defense have been adopted by even traditional public defenders offices. So for instance, our federal defender's office here, who do a phenomenal job, are also a holistic office that provides some of this approach and some of these services. And we know that this works from these experiences of other offices, and we can see this in the results of studies. This is one that I like. It was done by the Rand Corporation, published in the Harvard Law Review. This compared the performance of holistic defenders versus traditional models of indigent defense over a 10-year period. And that study found that holistic defenders reduced the likelihood of a custodial sentence by 16%. And reduce the expected sentence length by 24%. This means that if we use this model, there are people who are currently incarcerated in one way or another who would not be incarcerated if we, or would be out sooner if we use this model, right, to get these better outcomes. These models secured pretrial release more often. They enroll clients into supportive programs more often, see lower rates of failure to appear to court, which is really important. And the upshot of all of this is that it ends up saving the jurisdiction a lot of money by reducing the need for custodial punishment. This saves state and local taxpayers, at least in New York, it was $165 million on inmate housing costs alone for a program that over that 10 years cost about $90 million. So this is the holistic defense model. I want to pause here and ask if there's anything that I can do to help you all understand this holistic model before we go on to talk about the benefits of a defender's office as an addition to the appointed panel that we have now.
Sam, can you hear me? This is Shay.
Yes. Hi.
So in Douglas County, for misdemeanors, generally people are not held in custody, so they would not have a RADAC assessment before first appearances. So that part, I'm confused about what you were saying there.
So people may be, so according to the data that I got from Matt, and I could be wrong here, but there are a significant quantity of people who are booked at the jail for misdemeanor only, even if we don't count FTAs. And so my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that there is bond being set, people are being booked on misdemeanor cases, and
right.
Yeah.
Right, but to do a RADAC assessment, for instance, usually takes several weeks. So generally what happens, especially on misdemeanors, is they may be booked into the jail, but there's a praxis, basically a pre-agreed upon bond schedule. So they are more often than not released prior to their first appearance. So they do not go through RADAC. They would go to different provider.
Right. Sorry. When I was talking about RADAC, I wasn't talking about their assessment function. I was talking about their care coordination function. And Stacy, it might be helpful to get your input here. But in terms of the care coordination, not just the assessment, is that something that you see would be useful in the context of people charged with misdemeanors who may be receiving care coordination through your office and through having been referred through some other channel?
I don't think Stacy's still on the call.
Oh, shucks. Okay, well, I would like to follow up with her about that because, when she told me that they weren't meeting up with care coordination, my understanding was that this wasn't done through the regular assessments done at the jail as we'd see for felonies, but this is a separate program that they have to coordinate care coordination when they're referred, when a client is referred through some sort of, refer because they've had contact with some other program that they service. Does that make sense?
Yes, Sam, you're correct. They at the jail, they'll receive a screening for mental health and a screening for drug and alcohol. That is before an assessment. The screen is more of a determination that this person might need an assessment, not that it's not necessarily used for treatment recommendation. And so that's one clarification piece. But the second clarification piece is you do not need an assessment to qualify for care coordination services with RADAC.
Does that answer your question, Shay?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question, if no one. Sam, I just wanted to, I think I got thrown just a little bit by the slide in the comparison to appointed counsel. So I'm going to ask probably a really super basic question. I'm still trying to get my mind around the constellation of services and offices that are the criminal justice system here.
Right.
For holistic defense models, as you're suggesting, is it what you're proposing is not to supplant the appointed counsel system, but to be, and if it's not to supplant it, I guess I'm trying to find out, what is the relationship between, say, Bronx Defenders and their system? What is the relationship between She Still Rises, et cetera? Like how does it fit into the cosmos?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Some of that I'm going to address when I talk about how this complements the panel, but I think there's some basic information that maybe I skipped over that would be helpful. So felonies are the responsibility of the State Board of Indigent Defense Services, which coordinates both institutional defense offices in places they have them, like Shawnee County and Johnson County, and the appointments panel. So those are all funded through the state, and the panel is managed through the state system. By statute, county misdemeanors are the responsibility of the county. They're funded through the county through another panel. So when there is a holistic defenders office nonprofit that starts up, and this is spoiling things a little bit, but basically there is a contract to handle X percentage of cases, right? So in the case of the Bronx Defenders, they split half of the caseload in the Bronx with legal aid, which is the traditional defender there, right? In Still She Rises, they just take clients off of the appointments list, and say that's how Restoring Justice does. So, or in the case of Neighborhood Defender Services in Detroit, which just cut a felony contract for 25% of cases, right? So in these ways, I think the most efficient one is to cut some kind of contract. But even in a system in which an institutional defender is handling the vast majority of cases, there is still a need for a private bar. So for instance, the federal defenders handle most of the federal indigent defense cases, but there is a CJA panel that handles conflicts. And you're always going to need some kind of panel to handle conflicts no matter what scale you're operating at, simply because if multiple people get arrested in conjunction with the same offense, one office can't represent them. Two offices might not be able to represent all the people who are involved. So does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I want to talk about this in the context of what I think is most immediately possible, which is a misdemeanor contract here, simply because it's something that's totally within the control of the county to handle and fund and set up. Although I know that bids, last year you heard from Heather Cessna about the possibility of about them going through a process to establish an institutional defender. And I've also been speaking with bids around that, but that's sort of outside the scope of what I think we can do immediately. Does that make sense? Thank you. I really appreciate that question. And, I sort of live in this, and so it's very easy for me to skip over some of the stuff that's really key to understanding. So I really appreciate that. I am going to keep going, because I think that this will answer some more of what you're asking. How do these interact? The benefits of an institutional defender. So why would we have like a defense office contracting to sort of provide these services? And I want to be clear, this is not to say our panel attorneys are not doing an excellent job. Many of them are phenomenal. And this is not a choice about making, between an all panel or all public defender system, but rather a panel only system, which is what we have now, and a hybrid system that has both an institutional defender and a panel. And the fact is that hybrid systems work better. This is the guidance of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, the national organization that represents both private attorneys and public defenders, everyone doing criminal defense. And their guidance on this is very clear. Whenever the population and caseload needs supported, a public defense delivery system should include a full-time institutional defender, as well as the meaningful participation of private attorneys. And the reason why this is their guidance is because the data on this is pretty clear. In dozens of studies, and I'm only going to talk about 2 of them, but I do want to follow up with some information for you all that has more of these from other jurisdictions. I just didn't want to bog everyone down with numbers. But institutional defenders' offices secure better outcomes on average than systems with only private appointed attorneys. And so for one sort of stark example of this, we can look at Philadelphia. This study compared the outcomes of appointed and panel attorneys for 3,400 murder cases between 1994 and 2005. And compared to appointed counsel, those individuals who were represented by an institutional public defender had significantly better outcomes. The institutional public defenders reduced their clients' murder conviction rate by 19%, reduced the overall expected time served in prison by 24%, and lowered the probability their client would receive a life sentence by 62%. There's a number of other studies that show similar things in a variety of different contexts outside of murders. Even in the appellate and the federal system, we see this. And I'm sure that people are worried that if we're doing, especially if we're having a holistic model, the question is, does this take longer? And the answer is, this study compared the efficacy in Hennepin County, which uses the holistic model as well, and found that compared to appointed counsel, institutional public defenders had on average 1 fewer continuance per case. So an institutional public defender is often resolving cases more quickly. And the reason for this is pretty easy to understand. It largely comes as a result of operating an economy of scale that makes better service possible and offered more consistently. So where does this happen? So for instance, in training, this is a big one, particularly for improving the performance of new attorneys. Historically, a misdemeanor appointment panel might be where a new attorney goes to get experience. but there's no guarantee in the current system that they're going to have training and oversight or mentorship. I've been very lucky to have the mentorship of somebody like Tom Bath as I was serving on the appointments panel and that oversight, but there's no guarantee within the current system that that sort of thing necessarily happens. And so public defenders share training. They have active supervision programs to ensure that all attorneys are doing their best work. And attorneys can share the work, which is especially useful for, difficult situations or cases going to trial. Support is a big part of it. We've talked about the staff and the specialization that an institutional public defender, particularly with the holistic model, can have. That makes a difference. And the last thing is focus. An office that just does indigent defense can focus on indigent defense and doesn't have to consider the business aspects of running a law firm, of serving, the private clients that come in through the front door. All you have to do to get promoted and what is rewarded in a institutional defender's office is the quality of the outcomes you get for your clients, how hard you are fighting and working for your clients, and how much you are helping and supporting others in your office to do the same. And another sort of big aspect about it that I'm particularly excited about, because I'm a nerd for this, is that institutional defenders' offices can implement best practices. So, public defenders' offices around the country, particularly through groups like the National Association of Public Defenders, frequently share these best practices and ensure that offices use them. But there's also technological solutions that defenders' offices can have. So for instance, some offices have set up automatic text message systems to remind clients about their court dates, but other important service dates they might have to go to. And where this has been done, the failure to appear rates have dropped tremendously, between 2.6% in some cases, but up to 26% in other cases, which is huge. And it's a technology that only makes sense for an office that's operating at scale. It's not necessarily, and there's, case management systems that can be put in place as well, and ways to share data more efficiently between the courts, the DAs, and the defenders that you can do when you have a whole office that can come and sit down at the table and work with the others in the system to find these efficiencies. And ultimately, a holistic defender's office benefits attorneys on the panel as well. And I think the Kansas Federal Defenders have shown us exactly what this looks like. The federal defenders train up new attorneys through the second chair program. That's a program that I've benefited from. The federal defenders put out a newsletter every week of new developments in federal case law, and the federal defenders are able to litigate systemic issues that affect both private appointed attorneys and institutional defenders. And so ultimately, a strong institutional defender helps also panel attorneys and non-panel private attorneys that are going to be operating in the system. And so it's really about a partnership. So the question is, how can we get this set up? And this goes to the question that we got asked at the break. We know that the state is struggling to adequately fund indigent defense at the felony level. And so the most efficient way that we've discovered to fund these types of offices is a contract between the office and the county to provide services. And this is also more efficient for the courts rather than having a voucher system that is hourly for each individual case. It would be a contract to handle a pool of cases. And this is something that, again, I mentioned Neighborhood Defender Services in Detroit just had, Bronx Defenders has always done. And I also want to point out this last example, which is Kings County Department of Public Defense. And this is an interesting case study because for years, 4 different nonprofit defenders offices provided services. And in 2015, the county decided that they wanted to bring those services in-house. And did so. They combined all 4 offices into a single office that works directly in the county. So it's just to say that just because there is a contract between a nonprofit and the county doesn't mean that there's some kind of path dependence, doesn't mean that there couldn't be another way to provide services that this could transition into. So yeah, once again, that I'm excited to answer any questions or hear any comments or thoughts from you all about this proposal.
Sam, I had a couple of questions for you.
Mhm.
And thank you for the presentation. It's a very good presentation, very informative. In Douglas County, first appearances, that's where eligibility for indigent defense services is determined. So that would be the initial bond appearance for someone who's in custody. So I guess under this model you propose, how would you be able to get in and get engaged in the matter earlier in the proceedings before someone's made their first appearance, if that's where the eligibility for indigent defense is determined?
So there's a couple of ways to do that. One of these can be, often offices will do their own screenings, right? If we think that someone is quite likely to be able to qualify, we might take that on and maybe take on the risk that, actually this is not eligible, they might need another attorney, right? So that's one route, is to do our own screenings ahead of time. The other one would be to have these done for, certain kinds of cases that are more likely to have that kind of screening necessary. More likely to qualify for these kinds of services. But I think generally the best model that I've been able to find is a pre-screening that we do. So we would go to the jail, take a look at everybody, interview everyone for that initial screener to see who's likely to qualify for indigent defense services, and then take on the ones, and then we could also help those people fill out that application to qualify for indigent defense services. Does that answer?
No, it does. Thank you. And I just had one other question for you. When you were running through some statistics on outcomes and referencing Philadelphia and some metropolitan areas that were similar in size, do you have any statistics on outcomes for a jurisdiction that would be similar in size to Douglas County?
Absolutely, I do. So I'd like to point you to a study done in Iowa of indigent services provided at the, and I'll include this afterwards in a follow-up email. But this was a study that looked at appellate outcomes in Iowa that found that public defenders, people who were represented by public defenders for their appellate cases, were twice as likely to receive a positive outcome than defendants represented by appointment counsel. There was a significantly lower rate of default on appeals by public defenders in Iowa than there were by private counsel. It was a difference of a rate of 0.19% default for public defenders, and I believe 19% for the appointed counsel. And public defenders also had a much higher rate of getting issues before the Supreme Court than did the appointed counsel. So I think Iowa's one really good study, but actually there's a really phenomenal set of resources around this, which is coming out of the Texas Indigent Defense Committee. So Texas, most places operate on an appointments only system, and they've recently started converting many of these jurisdictions like Travis County over to an institutional defender system. And so they've gotten, and they have this state body that is tasked with studying this and implementing this, have a lot of case studies there, both from places like Travis County, in which there's, Austin, but also more rural areas, but also a variety of the smaller counties in Texas that I'd be happy to share. But that shows sort of very similar data and recommendations on this. But I think that they're a tremendous resource for looking at this in a context that's outside of like a coastal city.
Well, thank you, Sam. And I'll put my email in the chat. And I guess that kind of leads me to just one last question. In your talks with bids, have they mentioned anything? Has Heather Cessna mentioned anything about tracking outcomes? Because I know they don't currently do that.
So no, I haven't talked to Heather about tracking outcomes. And I think part of that is that, they've never really gotten the funding that they need. And she's going to the legislature this year to finally get that funding. And so being able to invest in like a case management system that allows you to get really granular data to do that work is something that I think is a part of her presentation. I know holistic service is also part of her presentation to the legislature. But we're going to be going to talk more with bids in March. And so I can definitely report back on that aspect of it. But I think it's important because if we're starting on this, on the small level for our office, being able to study what are the needs that we see coming up, and then, hiring and expanding based on what those needs really are is going to be really important to creating a defender's office that we're really proud of.
Thank you.
So I appreciated the fact that Sam met with me earlier. I think it was last week. I lose track of days sometimes. Met with Judge Hanley and Judge Donovan and myself. Got the heads up from I forget who about the Bronx Defender project. So I'd done some looking online before then. And everything I'm going to say right now, I'm saying only because I believe the spirit of CJCC is to share perspective among the people who are on this, who are on the council. And, so I don't want any of it to be taken as a criticism, but I think there's a lot of people hearing this information that's being presented and don't have anything to compare it to. And so I just want to offer some perspective from, I guess, the bench here in Douglas County, but it's as much, my own experience. I was a defense attorney starting out for the first 10 years of my practice. And, the systems that I was involved in involved private attorneys being paid through bids for felony work and through the county. Same thing we're doing here, Southeast Kansas here. And, what I told Sam in our discussion, and I've said publicly to anybody who's asked me, the bench in Douglas County is not pro panel appointments. We're not pro public defender's office. We are pro whatever we think will serve the ends of justice. And I don't say that as a cliche. I love hearing some of what Sam has said, and there may be some things to add on to it. And Sam certainly made it clear he's not criticizing the current panel attorneys. Effective, zealous representation, I think, is there's not a lot of question in my mind that we have that through the current panel appointments. I'm just going to go off some of the notes that I took while Sam was talking. I think it's important, the quote from the American Association for Defense Attorneys, I'm sure it's not the correct name, but the beginning of that quote was, whenever the population and caseload demands it, this introduction of the institutional defender's office has been shown to, and in combination with panel attorneys, produces the best outcome. I don't know enough about Douglas County to know what our population and caseload demands. And again, I think there's some things I've heard that can help. When I hear things about a 16% reduction of misdemeanor custodial and length of sentence stays, Matt Cravens can probably speak to this with specificity, but not as a defense attorney, not as a prosecutor, and not as a judge, is it my experience that in Douglas County, for misdemeanor cases, sentences are absolutely the exception rather than the rule. So when we hear reductions like that, it sounds aspirational, it sounds good. I think we'd have to look at what our actual numbers are. And, there's a flip side to that coin, is when misdemeanor sentences are imposed in Douglas County as the exception rather than the rule, it's because the nature of that case compelled that not normal outcome, which means there's a victim situation, there's a community safety situation that's implicated. So just raw numbers of reduction always make me think about that when I hear them. In so many ways, the practice of law has changed over time, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the bad. I just want to assure everybody who's hearing this, there are attorneys that I've known throughout my career, attorneys who currently serve on the Douglas County panel. I'm tempted to name one attorney who's no longer practicing, who I always admired when I was a prosecutor, admired how hard he worked in a holistic way on behalf of his clients to find those other services, to address the problem in a bigger way. And, you know, I don't know if it's fair because it's just me basing it off of my experience, but I think there's been a little bit of a draw away from that, maybe in the practice of criminal defense law over time. I could comment and offer the opinion also that that's probably partly the result of the issues that Heather Cessna is trying to address with the legislature and underfunding so much of the indigent defense work, but that's a separate issue. I don't want to digress on that. I will just say, if I ever return to the private practice of law and I'm doing defense work, things like what Tom Bath has shown me to do as a defense attorney and other attorneys that I've dealt with, I would take a much more holistic approach. And I think much of what we're hearing is sort of a call, you know, defense attorneys, when they attend CLEs on best practices, they hear many of these things and they're encouraged to do many of those things. And so I guess mostly I just want to reassure people who are hearing this, again, not as a criticism, not saying what my position is. So much of it does happen. And in my head, I haven't worked out how this would fit together. I think there's some practical questions that we have to ask about that. And that's why I'm saying all this. I think those are questions that need to be asked so we can fully explore it. The other quick comment I will make is, well, two things. To finish up that point, I would say that maybe the bench has a responsibility, but that can get awkward. Maybe the bar has a responsibility to do some more mentoring and some more, you know, helping the young attorneys who come in and know how to do those things. I feel lucky that some of the attorneys I can think of offered that to me when I first came to Douglas County and had my own office and was working as on the appointment panel. And, you know, they were always willing to do it. I don't have enough present experience to know if that's gone away or if that's something that is part of the culture now, but it should be. And then, you know, when we talk about outcomes for murder cases, and this is sort of a tie-in to my earlier point, or appellate cases, those have a lot more room for adjustment than the typical misdemeanor case in Douglas County. And so, again, it's just a matter of perspective for everybody to have a sense of where this might fit best in the equation, and to have that perspective to weigh out some of what we're hearing. And that's, again, not any criticism of Sam. I think I love seeing people who are passionate about the issue. I think it's a discussion worth having. If I were to editorialize any further, I would say this. I think that the relationship that exists between the district attorney's office and the defense bar is a critical factor in addressing so many of these issues. There has to be professionalism and dedication on both sides. There has to be communication. Institutional offices often help with that, but there's two sides to that coin, and I think that needs to be part of how we go forward in thinking about how this fits, if it does. And I hope that was helpful for people to have some perspective on things.
I'd like to chime in here, and I apologize. I'm in my car, which is why I've tried to stay silent, but I'm not sure I can. First, kind of following up with what Judge just said, one of the benefits, I think, clearly to having a public defender's office is the ability to have some united voice that comes in and says the criminal defense attorneys or the public defender's office wants this. Because even now, you know, I'm I am here as a private attorney who does criminal defense, but I do not speak for all of the criminal defense attorneys. And having an office would lend you to be able to have that one person, similar to our district attorney who speaks for the prosecution side, would allow you to have that one person. That said, what I would offer is, I appreciated a lot of Sam's presentation, but I'm not sure how it applies to what the proposal was. That's not necessarily a criticism, but rather I'm not sure I was following exactly how it would help here in Douglas County by doing a misdemeanor panel. For instance, talking about appellate cases, if you have someone who does a lot of appeals cases, obviously you're going to know the process real well. It's a completely different animal than doing the actual underlying cases. And this is one of the topics where I professionally and Shay individually have different ideas. Professionally, for instance, you know, if I'm selfish, I say I could probably make more money with having a public defender's office. But personally, I don't think or know, and I say that not having seen, maybe my mind can be changed, but I've not seen yet any place where that has worked well for a community of our size. And even in the Philadelphia study that was addressed just earlier last year, they ended up unionizing because they could not, well, I'm going to simplify, and I don't mean to oversimplify, but one of the reasons that they were unionizing had to deal with the same issues that public defenders offices have throughout our state, which is huge turnover rates, huge caseloads, and having issues keeping qualified people in those spots. So what I would say is I am certainly, I think the criminal defense bar in general would certainly love to hear ideas about how we could be better, how if there's going to be a public defender's office, we could collaborate with them to make sure that everyone's getting the justice that we all seemingly want. And I think, you know, when you talk about a holistic approach, clearly, that's been recognized not only by the prosecutor's office in terms of some of the programs that are being offered, but also in how cases are being approached in terms of what we're suggesting to resolve cases. So I think that there's clearly a place for that. And, you know, I think if this is something that Douglas County really wants to explore, I would request that we can get some of your information about what was happening at the Bronx Project, et cetera, and let's see if we can find a way that makes it work. But those are just my thoughts.
I really appreciate your thoughts, Shay. I'm very concerned about you driving while on video, but really appreciate your thoughts on this. I also really appreciate the judge's comments. I think that there is kind of two conversations that we're having here. And one is, what are some of the benefits of an institutional public defender's office in our community? What are some of the benefits to communities who have been traditionally underserved? And then what are some ways that we can really think about implementing this in our current environment? We know that our state is most likely not going to provide the funding necessary for indigent defense across the state. So what can we do here in our community? And I think that there are some really interesting structural pieces to think through. And so I really appreciate the focus on what kind of structure can we start with and how can we build, since this is something that just from my role on the Commission on Racial Equity and Justice from the Governor's Commission, we have really seen we've put out a recommendation that every community over 100,000, which Douglas County is now well over 100,000 citizens, have an institutional public defender's office, because we think this is important from a racial equity standpoint. So I'm excited that we're exploring some of the structural pieces of how we can move this forward as a community. And I know that the County Commission is really excited to hear the next steps on this and how we might be a part of it.
If I could just add a quick note, you know, from the state's perspective, constitutionally, we want to ensure that there's effective assistance of counsel. I mean, that's the constitutional requirement for defendants. Not only is it a federal constitutional requirement, it's the state, and it's in our statutes. And so you know, whatever format we decide as a community is the best way to go, that is going to be the key sort of question for us, because we want to ensure that everyone who is charged with the crime, put through the system, and ultimately, you know, whether there's a jury conviction or a plea agreement, whatever that is, that individual, that defendant who was charged with a crime, receives effective assistance of counsel, which is absolutely required. So we're in favor of that, however that comes about, and however we can work through it as a community, we're in support of. And so I just wanted to kind of give our perspective from what I think is something that is our goal.
Do we have any more questions, comments for Sam? This has been great discussion today. I really want to thank all the presenters. If we don't have any other CJCC business, I want to adjourn this meeting.
I think, Pam, we need to take public comment.
Oh, sorry. Do we have any public comment? Mike, do you see anybody with their hand raised?
Yes, we have Mari White. And there she should be. Mari, you should be able to comment.
Yeah, I thought you have to move her over as a panelist, so give us a minute.
Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. Mari, are you with us?
Mari, please unmute yourself and provide your public comment.
All right, let's move on to Kristen Kuhn. And Kristen, if you'd like to ask a question, we can come back to Mari.
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you. I just had a really quick question regarding the work groups. Are those meetings public? And if so, how do we access them?
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, the work group meetings are not public meetings. That's because it's the meetings where we really kind of do research and analyze data. And there's a lot of sifting through the data to make sure that we've got it correct before we present that publicly. But we do have multiple members from the community on the work groups. And as you may have heard, I think you've been on the majority of the meeting today. We absolutely encourage public members to join those work groups. If you're interested, you're welcome to email me about that.
Thank you very much.
And Mara, did you have a question? Or Mari? We may have lost her. Pam, Mari, if you're still there, we're not hearing you. Feel free to email me with any questions you may have, and I'll be glad to try. Oh, no, she's still on mute. Okay, go ahead, Pam.
All right. Do we have any other questions or comments for today?
I know we're running out of time. I do have one quick thing is we have been approached by the city of Lawrence and Citygate Associates, who is doing the assessment of police services in the city of Lawrence. They would like to conduct a listening session with the CJCC. And so we're going to put that on the agenda for the March 16th meeting. Wanted to give you a heads up about that. And I will double check to see if there's any information that we can get sent out to you ahead of that meeting, so you can be prepared. But that will be a good portion of our meeting on March 16th.
That sounds great. Thank you, Mike. Do we have anything else for the good of the order today? Seeing none, I'm going to adjourn the meeting today. Thank you everyone for participating.